What's up, YouTube? I'm Jeff the dog trainer, and these are the top 10 dog training mistakes that I see most often with my clients that are holding us back from training our pups as effectively as we can. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so dog training mistake number one, and by far and away the mistake I see most often in my clients, is repeating cues. Repeating cues. Repeating cues. Repeating cue. Oh, okay. You got it now. Good job. What's our natural reaction if we cue our dog to sit? So we say, sit, and they don't sit. Then we say, sit louder. We go, sit, and then they still don't sit. And we go, sit, and then they finally sit. And then we go, oh, what a good boy, and give them a treat. Well, this is super confusing to our pups, right? Because they don't speak English. So sit and sit are two different words to them. So what we can do by repeating cues like that is we can actually develop a dog that only sits on the third sit. Definitely not ideal. I've seen that in clients before, and believe me, it can be very frustrating for the owner and really for the dog too, because they're quite confused. Another way I see repeating cues is we ask the dog to sit, they sit, and then what do we say? Good, sit. Well, the dog, as we've just established, doesn't speak English. There is no way the dog is going to understand the finer points of grammar and understand that sit means I'm requesting a behavior from you, but good sit means I'm referencing a past behavior that you've already done. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work out. It's just confusing to the dog. And a lot of times, actually, if we train down and we say something like good sit after the dog's already sat, they'll actually lie down because they're thinking, okay, well, you're asking me to sit again and I just sat, so I'm not sure what you want, so I'll just go ahead and lay down. Not really what we want. So what I recommend and what I do in my training is you say the cue once, then give it about 3 to 4 seconds. If the dog has been trained on a hand signal, which we can get into later, they should be trained on hand signals. You can give a small hand signal for sit or down or whatever behavior you're working on to give them a hint. And when we do repeat a cue, we want to make sure we have about 3 to 4 seconds between when we gave the cue once before we repeat it again. That way the dog isn't linking the cues together and thinking, okay, the cue is actually sit, sit, rather than sit, 3 or 4 second pause, sit again. Then that will help our pups understand that we're asking for the cue again rather than repeating the same cue over and over. So training mistake number two that I see a lot of times is confusing body language. So our dogs are really perceptive of our body language, and dogs communicate in large part on body language. Almost every movement a dog makes, whether it's with their ears, the way their ears are positioned, their face, how much tension they have, what they're doing with their lips, their tail wagging, how tense their shoulders are, everything they do is really designed to send a message to us or to other dogs. And so dogs are always reading our body language. And we want to make sure that our body language is conveying what we want our dogs to do. So a common mistake people will make is they call their dog to come, and meaning they want the dog to leave whatever the dog's doing and come back to them. And then what do? We begin walking toward the dog. Well, that's very confusing to the what will happen in that instance is the dog will run away. It'll go in the opposite direction. Now, a lot of times owners will tell me, oh, the dog thinks it's a game. Now, that could be the case, but usually what's actually happening is the dog is picking up on your body language. So the dog sees you walking toward them and they're like, oh, you're going this way too? Okay, I'm going to go that way as well. So instead, with something like come or recall, we want to actually back away from the dog. We want to give the dog space, invite them into our space. By walking forward toward the dog, we're taking up space. And to go along with that, another area where I see this is let's go. So we've all been there on a walk, right? We allow our dog to stop and smell the flowers and enjoy the walk. And then we're like, all right, dude, it's been like 2 years. Come on. I gotta go. And so then it can be really helpful to train a let's go, meaning, hey, we're gonna continue on the walk. And what do most people do? They say, let's go, and they stand there and just stare at the dog and don't move. Well, that again is really confusing to the dog because you're saying, let's go with your voice, but your body language is saying, hey, what's on the ground right there is really interesting to me. So I'm going to stand here. And then the dog's like, oh, well, you're interested in this too? Okay, I'm going to stand here and keep sniffing this. So it's better to just say, let's go, and then begin walking in the direction you want to go. Your dog is going to pick up on your body language and your movement in that direction, and they're just going to follow you. It's natural for them to want to do that. And training mistake number 3 that I see most often is being too slow on the rewards. And this is really problematic when it comes to dog training. Dogs have to be rewarded within 1 to 2 seconds of performing a behavior to understand that that behavior is what's getting me this reward. And a lot of times we're not quite fast enough with the treats, or even if you're not using treats, praise, toys, affection, whatever it is, we're not quite fast enough with that to give the dog a reward so they understand, okay, the behavior I just did is now getting me this reward. So one way to help with that is to use a reward marker. Now, there are plenty of trainers out there that use clickers. That was made famous by Karen Pryor. And essentially the way the clicker works, if you're not familiar, is let's just say, for example, I was teaching a dog to sit. The second their hind end touches the ground, I'm going to click the button. And they make the association that the button equals a reward coming, and that can be really effective in training. Now, I as a trainer choose not to use a clicker because I find them to be a little bit cumbersome, especially when we're on walks and we got leashes and treats and poop bags and then a clicker on top of it, and it can get a little overwhelming. And sometimes clickers can be a little bit confusing to clients on when exactly to click. So in lieu of that, I use a reward marker with my voice, and I just say yes with a drawn out S like that. And the reason I draw out the S is so that it's a distinct sound and doesn't come up in conversation. And it's really important that we have something distinct, because if we just used yes and then we said yes in conversation a lot, then our dog is going to look up and be like, hey, where's my treat? I did something right. Where's my treat? And if we don't follow that up with a treat, eventually that reward marker will lose its meaning. So by using a reward marker like yes, we are helping our dogs understand that what they did is getting them the reward, and it's rewarding them in the instant. They understand, okay, my hind end hitting the ground on sit is now getting me this reward, and it just buys us a little bit of time to reach in our treat bag and give a treat, or to bend down and praise our dog, or pull out a toy or whatever we're going to use for positive reinforcement. The training mistake number 4 that I see most often is using the wrong cue for the wrong type of behavior. Now, let's think of stationary behaviors. So stationary behaviors would be behaviors like sit, down, stay. Those are all behaviors where we want our dog to stay still. We don't want them to move. And so cues like sit, down, stay are very good because they're very abrupt sounding. They're like, whoa, okay, I'm going to stop. Boom. And that's perfect. That plays right into the behavior we're asking for. Now, with a behavior like come, that is a behavior that requires movement. It will always require movement. No matter how far away you are, no matter what your dog's doing, if you're calling them to come, they have to get up and move to us. So we want to use a cue that makes the dog want to move. So if we say something like come, well, come sounds an awful lot like sit and down and stay. It's very abrupt sounding, and it actually makes our dogs naturally want to stay still. And I'm not saying you can't use come at all. You can train it, but it's going to be just a little bit harder. So what I typically recommend is come, come, come. It's the same thing to us, but to the dog, it's totally different. And the reason why come, come, come is effective is because it's repeated and it's higher pitch. That repeated high pitched sound makes all animals want to move. So think about horses, for example. How would you get a horse to move forward? Well, you can't just pull it because it's a giant horse. So you typically do something like make that kind of clicking sound, that repeated high-pitched sound that makes a horse want to move forward. Even in people, it makes us want to move. So think about fire alarms. Fire alarms are designed to get us up and moving out of a building. And what are they? They're high-pitched, repeated sounds. They make us want to go. You can even think about military training. If somebody's like, go, 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 go. So changing your cue from come to come, come, come. It's a very small change, but it can have a huge impact on your wingman's recall. And training mistake number 5 that I see most often is getting frustrated during training. Now, training can be really frustrating, especially if you've just gotten off work. You come back, maybe your dog's redesigned your sofa, left a nice little present for you right in the entryway when you got home. And I know those times can be super frustrating. We don't want to train while we're frustrated. And there's a few reasons for that. One, body language. I've been saying this whole time, dogs are very perceptive of body language. Well, if we're frustrated, we're a lot more tense. And our dogs are going to pick up on that frustration. To couple with that, we tend to restrict rewards when we're frustrated. So our dog does a behavior that we want, and we don't reward them as much, or we withhold rewards altogether because we're like, oh, you're frustrating me so bad, I'm not giving you a treat for that one. Well, that's really not effective to learning. It'd be like if your boss got frustrated at you, so he just decided to stop paying you. That's not really how that works. We don't want to train when we're frustrated. If we feel frustrated, it's best to just stop training altogether and come back when we feel a little better and we're a little bit more calm and we're willing to sit down and work with our dogs. All right, so that brings us to training mistake number 6. Yep, we're on the other hand now. So training mistake number 6 would be upping the difficulty too quickly. And I see this so often in training. And a good example would be like we train come to a very basic foundational level, maybe in the house around no distractions. And then we expect him to perform a come when we're at a dog park and there's a bunch of off leash dogs playing and we're shocked when he doesn't do it. Well, why would he do it? That would be like if I taught you to do a somersault and then I put you on the US Olympic gymnastics team. It's probably not going to work out too well. So we really want to make sure that we are moving at our dog's pace and we're increasing distractions slowly and methodically and keeping up the rewards throughout. So a great way to do this is I do all training in sets of 5. And how much I advance the difficulty is dependent on how many times the dog gets a behavior right out of 5. So if the dog gets a behavior right 5 out of 5 times, then we'll move to the next level of difficulty. If he gets a behavior right 3 to 4 times out of 5, then we'll stay at the same level of difficulty for another set of 5. And if he gets 0 to 2 right out of 5, then we'll drop to the previous level of difficulty. This is a great approach to training. It's a systematic approach, and it makes sure training keeps moving forward, but it keeps moving forward at our dog's pace. And it's really common that just like we were in school, I'm sure in school you had subjects that you got them boom right away and you were really, really good at them. And then some subjects you needed extra tutoring, you needed help, and you just felt like you couldn't get it no matter how hard you tried. Dogs are the same way. Sometimes they're really good at leave it, but they just aren't quite good at sit or down. And that's okay. It also helps us make sure by doing things in sets of 5 that we don't stagnate at any point in training. That's another big problem is we'll train up to a certain level and then we just kind of plateau. So we're going up, 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 and then we just level off. Our dog's sitting there like, yeah, I know this game. I got this game down pat. Let's move on to something else. So going in sets of 5 will help out a lot. All right, guys, and training mistake number 7, and this is a huge one that I see all the time in people that are not professional dog trainers, and I totally understand why, but it can be really problematic. And that is asking for a behavior we want while the dog is performing a behavior we don't want. I know that might sound confusing, but let me explain it for you. So let's say our dog is jumping on guests when they enter the house. What we don't want to do is ask for a sit a behavior we would rather see while the dog's jumping or immediately after the dog jumps. And the reason that is because we can actually inadvertently back chain a behavior, meaning we've chained multiple behaviors together inadvertently. So what can happen if we do that? So the dog's jumping and we say, sit, 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 is, well, one, we're repeating cues, which we don't want to do, but also the dog will jump in order to get us to say sit so that the dog gets attention. They are pretty smart, they're pretty tricky and pretty clever, so we don't want to do that. And that leads us right into training mistake number 8 that I see most often, and that is inadvertently rewarding a behavior that we don't want. So, a great example of that is jumping on guests or jumping on us when we get home from work. So, what's our common reaction when a dog jumps on us when we walk in the door? Get off of me, and we start pushing him. Well, that's really problematic, and it's actually rewarding the behavior, because a lot of times when the dog is jumping on us, all they want is attention. And I know we don't want to get our clothes dirty, our work clothes, and we're pushing the dog off to try to keep their paws off of our clothes, but it is rewarding the behavior. And the reason it's rewarding is because when we start pushing on the dog, they see that as paw play. And that can really cause a problem, because they're like, oh, every time I jump on you, you start playing with me. And even if we talk to them, if we don't push, but we say, get off of me or something like that, we're still talking to them and we're still giving them that attention that they want. Even eye contact with our dogs can be a form of attention that will encourage them to keep jumping. Now, this tip is only for dogs that are jumping for attention. If your dog is acting aggressively toward guests or you entering the house, you need to seek advice from a professional dog trainer. So if they're jumping, I recommend we cross our arms. That reminds us we don't want to push on the dog. We're not going to use our hands, so we cross our arms. This is also a great body language signal to our dogs to say, hey, I am totally closed for business right now until you calm down. And then we're going to look up and away. So we don't want to look down and away, because if we look down and away, we still might be making eye contact. And our dogs sometimes will think that maybe we're just being a little coy with them or whatever. So we want to look up and away. And if you think about that behavior, that's actually what's known as a calming signal in dogs. And most often you'll see that if you're cuddling the dog when they don't want to be cuddled. So we wrap our arms around them to cuddle them, and what do? They kind of turn their head back like that. They're giving you the same signal. They're saying, hey, I'm not really into this right now. So by crossing our arms and looking up and away like that, we're saying, hey, I'm closed for business. You're way too excited, and I'm not really feeling this right now, and I'd like you to get off of me, please. So that's really effective. What we don't want to do is knee our dogs when they jump on us or hurt them in any way. That has, one, that can actually make the dog scared when you get home from work. Two, that can cause the dog to become aggressive toward guests when they enter the house, because they think they're going to get hurt in some way every time someone comes over. So we really don't want to do that. Just simply crossing our arms, looking up and away. That is the most effective way at getting the dog to stop jumping. And that brings us to training mistake number 9 that I see most often, and that is punishing an unwanted behavior without teaching an alternative behavior. We need to train an alternate behavior. Otherwise, we're not really training anything. All we're doing is punishing. So the dog jumps on the counter, he gets punished. Okay, well, he got off the counter, but we didn't teach him what we want him to do instead, which would be sit or lay down in the kitchen, rather than jump on the counter and try to steal food. So if you have questions on how to train an alternate behavior, drop them down in the comments below. I'm happy to answer those for you. All right, guys, and that brings us to our final training mistake of the video, training mistake number 10, and that would be not managing an unwanted behavior while trying to teach something else. So management of a behavior is always the first step in training. So let's use pulling on a walk as an example. The dog pulls on the leash. Okay, well, we want to train to not pull on the leash. Makes sense. But we have to first manage that behavior. And management simply means controlling the environment so there's no reward for the behavior we don't want. With the example of walking on the leash or pulling on the leash, if our dog is allowed to continue to pull on the leash to get closer to what he wants, then pulling still works for the dog. So, first step is when the dog pulls, we stop dead in our tracks. You don't get any closer to what you want to get to if you continue to pull. And that plays in really any behavior. So, counter surfing, like I talked about in the last tip, unless we get that under control first, we can't train an alternate behavior of sitting, because I can give a training treat all day for a dog sitting, but if he can just jump up on the counter and take a whole ribeye steak that you're making for dinner, well, he's just going to do that instead. So, first, in the example of counter surfing, we need to either get all the food off the counter, all the crumbs, everything, keep the counters totally clean so there's nothing rewarding up there, or we have to just limit our dog's access to the kitchen through baby gates or some other device that just allows us to cordon off the kitchen so the dog can't get in there. All right, guys, I hope this video helped. If you have any questions or any other video recommendations that you want to see and you want answered by a professional dog trainer, by all means, drop them down in the comments below. We got a ton of great content coming out, so make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and shoot us a follow over on Instagram at LimaCharlie_dog training. You get to see all the pups I work with as they graduate. I post their picture on there, and I give training tips on Instagram as well. So if you're interested in that, please shoot us a follow over there. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one.